It was just past midnight when I parked my old sedan outside the abandoned Kmart. The town had long forgotten this place, but I had been hired to keep watch over it, an empty, crumbling building with a reputation no one wanted to mention. The air was biting cold, and the faint mist rolled across the cracked asphalt, curling around my tires. My flashlight rested on the passenger seat, and my heart already raced before I even stepped out. The doors groaned as I pushed them open, and a wave of musty metallic air hit me. I paused, listening. The only sounds were the distant hum of a street lamp and the soft crunch of dead leaves under my boots. Inside, shadows stretched across empty shelves and toppled shopping carts. The flickering fluorescent lights above sputtered weakly, casting shapes that moved just out of focus. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. But as I moved further down the first aisle, I heard it, a whisper, so soft it almost blended with the hum of the broken lights. "Help me," it said, almost pleading. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I swung it toward the toy aisle. The shelves were empty, except for an old rocking horse swaying gently, its faded paint chipped and cracked. Every instinct screamed to leave, but I had a job to do. I switched on my portable walkie-talkie to check in with my supervisor, but static was all I got. Then, a giggle echoed down the electronics section, high-pitched and wrong. My stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. Something was here with me. A few aisles over, I saw it, or at least a shadow. Standing impossibly still, a man-shaped figure with no face stared at me from between the racks. When I blinked, it vanished. My flashlight flicked across the floor to reveal nothing but the scattered debris of forgotten merchandise. Then the whispering started again. This time a chorus, voices overlapping. "Stay, stay, don't leave." By the second hour, the Kmart seemed alive in a way that made my blood run cold. Shopping carts shifted subtly as I walked past, making squeaks that echoed too loudly in the vast emptiness. The whispers became distinct voices, calling out names I didn't know, urgent and trembling. I checked the office area at the back. Dust-covered chairs lay overturned, and papers strewn across the floor appeared as if someone had just been rifling through them. One door remained locked, the manager's office. I hesitated, hand trembling on the knob. A shiver ran down my spine, but something compelled me to open it. Inside, the room was empty except for a single chair, facing a corner. On the floor, written in what looked like dried ink, were the words, "You shouldn't be here." My pulse surged. The air was heavier now, colder, every breath I took visible in white puffs. And then, the figure appeared again. Dark, faceless, standing in the toy aisle. It raised an arm, pointing at me, a slow, deliberate movement. My legs froze, and for the first time I truly understood the word paralyzed. My flashlight slipped from my hands, rolling across the floor, and in that brief darkness the whispers became deafening. "Join us. Stay with us." Something brushed past my shoulder, cold and wet. I spun around. Nothing. The fear pressed in from every direction, an invisible weight on my chest. And then, the toys. They moved. Dolls rotated on their shelves. Rocking horses swayed violently. Board games toppled onto the floor as if pushed. I stumbled backward, tripping over a cart, my heart hammering, adrenaline blinding every thought. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. My phone had no signal. Every number I dialed was dead except one. Static filled the line, then a distorted voice, eerily familiar. "We've been waiting." I slammed the phone down, stomach twisting. The aisles seemed to close in, shadows stretching like claws. I ran, zigzagging through the collapsed shelves, hearing hundreds of whispers, footsteps, and soft giggles all around me. My flashlight flickered violently, and in the brief light, dozens of faceless figures emerged from every dark corner. They floated, gliding, reaching toward me. I reached the exit doors, slamming against them with every ounce of strength I had. They didn't budge. My reflection in the glass stared back at me, but behind me the figures loomed, faceless and pale, whispering in unison, "Stay. Forever." In desperation, I slammed my shoulder against the doors one last time. The lights went out. Silence, absolute and suffocating. I could feel them breathing on my neck, surrounding me, a cold presence pressing into my bones. Then the doors suddenly gave way, and I fell onto the cracked asphalt outside. The building looked abandoned, peaceful under the moonlight. My legs shook, hands cut from debris I couldn't remember. And in my pocket, a small cracked toy doll stared up at me with hollow eyes I'd never seen before. I drove away, never looking back. But even now, years later, on quiet nights, I hear faint whispers. You forgot something. We're still inside. It started as any normal night shift should. I pulled into the cracked parking lot of the old Kmart, the town's forgotten landmark, where broken neon lights flickered intermittently. The chill of late October made the hairs on my arms stand, but I told myself it was just the cold. My name is Jake, and I'd been hired to watch over this abandoned place, though I'd never seen it in person before tonight. Pushing open the heavy doors, I was greeted by the smell of mold, rust, and decay, a combination that made my stomach twist. The store was silent, but not entirely. Somewhere deep inside, I heard the faintest whisper, almost like a warning. Don't stay. I shook my head, blaming it on imagination, but my flashlight wobbled in my hands as if it had a mind of its own. The first aisle was quiet, yet every shelf seemed to lean just slightly toward me, as if waiting. A rocking horse in the toy section swayed gently, though no breeze existed. I took a few steps further, scanning every corner, every shadow. Then I saw it, a dark shape at the end of the electronics aisle. I blinked, and it was gone. Only silence remained, broken by the distant hum of the flickering lights. I walked deeper into the store, every footstep echoing unnaturally. A shopping cart squeaked behind me, though I hadn't moved anything. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe the building settled, maybe the floor warped. Then I heard my own voice whispering from somewhere else. You're not alone. Panic set in. I ran toward the back rooms, doors creaking with every push. My flashlight flickered violently, and in that moment, the store seemed to stretch, aisles elongating impossibly. I spun in place, but everything looked the same. The same carts, the same shelves, the same shadows. And then I realized I had walked these aisles before. Not earlier tonight, before at all. My heart thumped wildly as a creeping dread wrapped around me. Something was wrong. Time wasn't right. Minutes, or was it hours? Later, I found myself at the front entrance again. The parking lot outside was the same, the neon lights still flickering, the mist curling across the asphalt. But something felt different. The rocking horse swayed in the toy aisle, the same way it had moments ago. Or had it been hours? I ran down the aisles again, and the whispers returned, louder this time, overlapping into a cacophony of voices. Don't leave. Stay. Join us. Shadows flickered along the walls, forming shapes that almost looked human yet faceless. The store seemed alive now, breathing around me. Every time I reached what I thought was a new section, I was back where I started. The first aisle, the rocking horse, the collapsed board game shelf. My flashlight's beam quivered. My mind began to fracture. Each loop repeated, slightly different, more aggressive, more urgent. Something was watching, learning, adapting. By the third loop, I saw the first entity clearly, a tall, faceless figure standing at the end of the toy aisle. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze, heavy and penetrating. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. When I looked away and back again, it was gone. And yet, it felt closer, always closer. Objects shifted subtly in each loop. A shopping cart would be slightly to the left, a chair would topple to the right. The whispers followed me relentlessly. I couldn't leave. I couldn't even tell how much time had passed. I wasn't moving forward. I was trapped in a repeating nightmare. Hours, or eternities. Later, I found a new door I hadn't seen before. It was the manager's office, locked solid. Something compelled me to open it. My hand shook violently as the lock clicked. Inside, the room was empty except for a single chair in the center. On the wall, smeared in dust, "You cannot escape." The loops accelerated. Every aisle now pulsed with movement, shadows darting just out of sight, whispers overlapping, objects toppling. My own footsteps seemed to echo in reverse sometimes, as if the store itself mocked me. The faceless figure appeared again, sometimes behind shelves, sometimes reflected in broken glass, always closer, always patient. I tried the front doors one last time. My shoulders slammed against the metal, but they wouldn't budge. Through the glass, my reflection stared back, but behind me, dozens of faceless figures loomed, their whispers joining into a deafening roar. Stay? Forever? In desperation, I hurled myself at the doors. Suddenly, everything went black. Silence, heavier than I could breathe. Then the doors gave way, and I fell onto the cracked asphalt outside. The building looked peaceful, abandoned under the moonlight. My body shook uncontrollably. Cuts and bruises appeared where I hadn't felt anything. And in my pocket, I found it. A small, cracked toy doll, its hollow eyes staring up at me. A whisper carried in the cold night air. "You forgot something." The loop never ends. Even now, years later, when I pass by the abandoned Kmart, the wind seems to whisper my name, and I remember, no one ever truly leaves. I'd always been drawn to places people whispered about. The abandoned Kmart on the edge of town was the kind of place everyone said was haunted, yet I couldn't resist. My name is Emma, 16, and tonight, armed with only a flashlight and my curiosity, I slipped past the rusty chain-link fence and into the dusty parking lot. Inside, the smell hit me first. Mildew, rust, and the faint scent of forgotten merchandise. Shelves stood like skeletal remains, empty, but looming. My flashlight beam shook slightly as I stepped forward, illuminating the remnants of a once bustling store. Toppled carts, faded posters, cracked tiles. It was in the toy section that I saw it. Half buried under a pile of dusty board games and broken dolls sat a small porcelain doll. Its eyes were glassy, almost too real, and the corners of its painted mouth were curved in a faint, unsettling smile. I knelt down and picked it up. The doll was surprisingly heavy, as though it held something inside. The moment my fingers brushed its cracked surface, I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. A faint whisper, barely audible, brushed my ear. Finally, I froze. No one was there. I laughed nervously at myself and tucked the doll under my arm. "It's just the wind," I muttered. But deep down, I knew this doll wasn't ordinary. I wandered further, the doll clutched tightly, when the overhead lights flickered violently. Shadows stretched and warped across the aisles. I thought I saw movement, something darting just beyond my flashlight's reach. My heart thumped painfully. The doll seemed heavier now, almost as if it was resisting me, pulling me back toward its shelf. I couldn't leave it there. I had to know its story. That night I put the doll on my desk and tried to sleep. The room was silent, yet I dreamed vividly, dreams I didn't understand. I was back in the Kmart, walking its endless aisles, but everything was slightly wrong. The shelves leaned closer, shadows stretched unnaturally, and the whispers were louder, clearer. "You shouldn't have taken me." I jolted awake, gasping. The doll sat on my desk, perfectly still, but somehow closer than I'd left it. The whispers weren't gone. They lingered in the corners of my room, soft and insistent, and when I blinked, I could have sworn its painted smile had widened. Over the next few nights, the doll haunted me relentlessly. It appeared in different places in my room, always staring. Dreams and reality blurred. I began to remember snippets of the Kmart's past, a history of missing children, strange accidents, and whispered tales of cursed toys. Each night, The doll replayed these stories in my mind, scenes I had never witnessed but felt horrifyingly real. Objects in my room shifted subtly when I wasn't looking. The air grew cold around the doll, my skin prickling. Shadows moved independently, stretching along walls, curling around furniture. The more I resisted, the more insistent it became. Its whisper, now unmistakable, "Stay with me." I tried to tell my parents, my friends, but no one saw the doll move. No one heard the whispers. I was alone. Days blurred into nights. School, chores, everything seemed distant as the doll's power grew. One evening, I returned from a brief errand to find it sitting in my backpack, though I had left it on my desk. I tried to throw it out the window, but it always returned, waiting, smiling. I returned to the abandoned Kmart, desperate for answers. The store was darker than before, shadows pooling in impossible angles. Dust-covered shelves now bore new items I had never seen. And there it was, the same doll, waiting, eyes glinting under the flickering lights. I tried to leave, but the doors slammed shut. Whispers surrounded me, dozens of voices overlapping. "You belong here. Forever." The doll seemed to float slightly, hovering above the shelves, its smile widening, its glass eyes gleaming with malice. I ran, dodging falling shelves and shadows that reached for me, my heart hammering so loud I thought it might burst. Finally, I reached the exit, throwing the doors open. The cold night air hit me, and I fell onto the cracked asphalt. I was free, or so I thought. Back in my room, I found it sitting on my pillow, its gaze fixed on me. The whispers carried on the wind outside my window. "You can't leave. Not now." Even now, when I walk past abandoned stores, I feel its presence. And I know one truth. Some toys are never meant to be touched. And some curses never end. I had always been drawn to places people said I shouldn't go. The abandoned Kmart at the edge of town was one of them. Everyone whispered about strange disappearances and unexplained events. But I was 16, curious, and fearless. Or so I thought. My name is Lila, and tonight I slipped past the rusted chain-link fence with nothing but a flashlight and my backpack. Inside, the store smelled of mildew, rust, and decay. Dust coated every shelf, every forgotten toy, and every toppled mannequin. The aisles stretched endlessly under the weak beam of my flashlight. Somewhere in the distance, a faint metallic clang echoed, though I was sure I was alone. I wandered into the security office, a small room cluttered with old monitors and tangled cords. Most screens were dark, but one flickered weakly. On it, a timestamp from years ago appeared. 2012. I leaned closer. The footage showed the Kmart as it once was, bustling with customers and employees, but something felt off. A shadow flickered among the aisles, moving unnaturally, jerking from one side to another. Then the figure paused and turned toward the camera, its face just out of focus, but horrifyingly human-like. A whisper rose through the static. "Why are you here?" My stomach churned. I tried to shake it off. Old footage, glitches. It had to be. But then the strangest thing happened. The footage predicted what would happen in real time. A shelf teetered on the monitor, and I turned my head just in time to see it wobble in the same way. Another screen showed a cart tipping, and seconds later it fell in front of me. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Watch. Do not move." Every instinct screamed at me to leave, yet I couldn't. My eyes were glued to the screens, to the shadow that seemed alive, waiting. The next night I returned with my laptop. I needed to see everything clearly to understand what was happening. The cameras were no longer passive. They were alive. The feeds had changed. Older scenes I hadn't seen before appeared, aisles that didn't exist, shelves that had vanished, and glimpses of the shadow moving closer to me. At one point I caught sight of myself on the monitor, standing near the electronics section, even though I had never walked there. My heartbeat accelerated. The figure mirrored my movements perfectly. I could feel its presence behind me, just beyond the edge of my flashlight beam. Static erupted across the monitors. Whispers overlapped, forming fragmented sentences. "You cannot leave, mine, not yet. Watch carefully." Shadows stretched along the aisles, slithering over the cracked tiles. My flashlight flickered violently. I spun around. Nothing. But the cameras didn't lie. The figure was closer now. I realized with horror that the footage was showing the future, a future where the shadow would claim me if I didn't act. Panic surged, and I ran toward the main doors. They wouldn't open. I was trapped inside the Kmart, the monitors displaying every corridor, every shelf, every shadow with unnerving precision. A mannequin fell behind me. I froze. The shadow wasn't on the screens anymore. It was in the aisles, moving toward me. Its faceless silhouette pressed against the dim lights, and I could feel it, cold and silent, brushing past my shoulder. Hours, or maybe it was days, I could not tell anymore. Desperation clawed at me as I found a dusty old tape labeled Security 2012. Hands trembling, I inserted it into the VCR. The screen flickered, and there I was, older, terrified, running down the aisles. The shadow followed relentlessly, closer than ever. Static consumed the footage, and whispers became coherent sentences. "You are mine. There is no escape." The aisles stretched unnaturally around me, shelves bending, shadows multiplying, doors disappearing. The Kmart itself had become alive, an endless maze designed to trap me. I screamed, but no sound came. My own reflection on the monitors twisted and distorted, showing my fears before they had even happened. I tried to flee through the main exit. The doors briefly opened. I stumbled onto the cracked asphalt outside. Cold night air hit my face, but I felt the shadow's grip tightening on my shoulders, whispering, "You belong to the footage now." Even now, months later, I cannot watch CCTV anywhere without catching glimpses of that figure. It lingers in corners, in reflections, in static. The old footage has followed me, predicting and haunting every step. And somewhere in that abandoned Kmart, the cameras continue to roll, watching, waiting, for the next curious soul. The fluorescent lights of the Santa Clara Kmart hummed with a dying energy, mirroring the store itself. 5 months. That's all the time we had left, a countdown to the inevitable closure. I, Jacob, was one of the few new hires, a management trainee stepping into a sinking ship. Most days the store felt eerily empty, the vast aisles echoing with the ghosts of bargain hunters past. My night shifts were the worst. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building settling or the distant hum of the freezers fighting a losing battle against time. One particular Tuesday, the air felt heavier than usual. Shadows seemed to dance at the periphery of my vision, and a persistent feeling of being watched prickled my skin. I was stacking shelves in the near-deserted home goods section when I heard it, a faint dragging sound coming from the toy aisle. Kids were long gone. The store was practically a mausoleum after 9 p.m. Heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way towards the sound. The toy aisle was a kaleidoscope of forgotten dreams. Dolls with vacant stares lined the shelves, their plastic eyes glinting in the beam of my light. Then I saw it. A large clown doll perched precariously on a high shelf. Pinky the Clown, its tag read. Its painted smile seemed wider than it should have been, almost mocking. As I watched, a slow creak echoed, and the doll's head tilted slightly to the side as if acknowledging my presence. I told myself it was just the old building, the drafts, my overactive imagination. But the unease lingered. Later that night, while reviewing inventory in the silent office, I found a crumpled note tucked inside a dusty binder. "He's watching. The clown knows." There was no signature, just those chilling words. I tried to dismiss it as a prank, but the memory of Pinky's tilted head sent a shiver down my spine. This store, I was beginning to realize, held more than just discounted merchandise. It held secrets that didn't want to stay buried. The next day I sought out Edith, a cashier who had worked at this Kmart for what seemed like an eternity. Her eyes held a depth that suggested she had seen things most people hadn't. When I mentioned the strange note and the unsettling feeling during my night shift, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You felt it, did you?" she murmured, her voice raspy. "This place, it remembers things, especially after dark." I pressed her about the note, about any strange occurrences. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. 5 months ago, our manager, Atlas, he died in his office during the night. They said it was a heart attack, but some of us, we heard things that night, strange noises like someone was struggling. Edith told me that Atlas had become increasingly withdrawn in the weeks leading up to his death, muttering about shadows and a feeling of being watched. She also mentioned that he kept a personal journal, a management diary he never let out of his sight. After his death, the journal mysteriously disappeared. Driven by a growing sense of dread and a need for answers, I started looking for Atlas's missing diary. I searched his old office, now used for storage, but found nothing. Then Edith suggested the basement, a dusty, forgotten space most employees avoided. The air down there was cold and damp, the silence broken only by the drip of a leaky pipe. Amidst the cobwebs and forgotten stock, I found it, a leather-bound journal hidden beneath a pile of old flyers. The title was barely legible, The Silent Atlas. As I opened the brittle pages, a wave of cold air washed over me. Atlas's handwriting was frantic, filled with paranoia and fear. He wrote about unsettling occurrences in the store after closing, objects moving on their own, and a constant feeling of a malevolent presence. He mentioned the toy aisle frequently, and one particular entry stood out. The clown. Its eyes. They follow me. The last entry was dated the night of his death. I can't breathe. It's here. In the dark. Atlas's diary painted a terrifying picture, but it also raised more questions. Why would a grown man be so afraid of a clown doll? And what was the "it" he referred to in his final entry? The diary also contained a recurring symbol, a crudely drawn keyhole. Edith recognized it. "That's the mark on the door to the old storage room in the back," she said, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and understanding. "No one's used it in years. It was locked up after some incident a long time ago." The old storage room, it wasn't on any of the store's current maps. Following Edith's vague directions, I found it tucked away behind a wall of shelves in the back of the hardware section. The door was made of thick, dark wood, and the keyhole matched the symbol in Atlas's diary. It was locked tight. That night, armed with a set of lockpicks I'd nervously purchased online, I returned to the storage room after everyone had left. The silence in this part of the store was oppressive, almost suffocating. After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked open. The room was small and windowless, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. A single bare bulb hung precariously from the ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows. In the center of the room sat a glass display case, and inside, illuminated by a small spotlight, was Pinky the Clown. Its painted smile seemed even more sinister in the dim light, its eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. As I approached the case, a sudden gust of cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the bare bulb and plunging me into darkness. A blood-curdling giggle echoed around me, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My heart hammered against my ribs, and a primal fear gripped me. Something was in the room with me, something ancient and malevolent. A faint scratching sound started, growing louder, closer. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking uncontrollably. When the beam finally cut through the darkness, I saw it. Small, shadowy figures scurrying along the floor, their eyes glowing red in the light. They were like grotesque animated toys, and they were heading straight for me. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of old boxes. The shadowy figures hissed and darted around me, their touch like icy needles on my skin. Just as I thought they would overwhelm me, A voice echoed through the darkness, cold, commanding, and familiar. Enough. The shadowy figures froze. The single bulb flickered back to life, revealing Daniel standing in the doorway, a look of cold fury on his face. In his hand, he held a small antique music box. "You shouldn't have come here, Jacob," Daniel said, his voice dangerously low. "This power, it was meant to revitalize this store, to bring back the glory days." He revealed the truth. The music box contained a trapped entity, a malevolent spirit that could influence the store's objects, giving them a semblance of life. Daniel had discovered it years ago and had been secretly using it to create a sense of eerie novelty, hoping to boost sales. Atlas had discovered his secret and had tried to stop him, leading to his heart attack, a consequence of the entity's power, orchestrated by Daniel. Pinky the Clown was the entity's primary conduit, its favorite puppet. As Daniel wound the music box, a dark energy filled the room. Pinky the Clown's eyes glowed brighter, and the shadowy figures began to advance again, their movements more fluid, more menacing. Daniel believed he could control the entity, but he was wrong. The power he sought to wield was far greater than he could comprehend. The music box began to play a distorted, unsettling melody. Daniel started to convulse, his eyes rolling back in his head. The shadowy figures turned on him, their icy touch draining his life force. He collapsed to the floor, a lifeless husk. I knew I had to get out, to escape this nightmare. As I fled the storage room and the dying Kmart, I could still hear the faint, chilling melody of the music box and the echoing laughter of Pinky the Clown. The store closed its doors forever, but I knew the evil within had been unleashed, its silent influence spreading beyond the empty aisles of a forgotten Kmart. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear the faint giggle, a haunting reminder of the secrets hidden within the silent atlas of that doomed store.